Nancy is a medical student. After her mother's death, she was overwhelmed by her grief. What she couldn't let go of was the fact that even as a doctor, she couldn't bring her mother back from the disease. She even decided to give up her medical studies. Nancy is also a surfer just like her mother. She was inspired by the memory where they once had a fascinating time at a secret beach in Mexico 20 years ago. To remember her mother, Nancy went to a beach that only few local folks knew about. With picturesque scenery, Nancy changed her gear and surfed the waves against the current. And met two surfers. They were locals who knew the waters very well and told Nancy that the tide only comes in once a day. The reef not far from here will form a small island after the tide's gone, and they warned Nancy that the coral under the reef stings hard. As it's getting late, the two men are ready to leave. As she sat on her surfboard, she felt something's is moving underneath the calm water. Suddenly something leapt out of the water and Nancy saw a group of dolphins. So she swam forward after them, and then she found the carcass of a whale. At that very moment, a gigantic shark swam in her way, and a large group of feeding gulls were frightened and flew away. Nancy also sensed the danger and rushed to the shore, but it was too late. The shark knocked over the board and crunched her with blood instantly staining the water. The wound on her thigh was horrific, bleeding profusely. She put the surfing anklets on her thighs to act as the blood of the bandages. Then Nancy found two surfers still on shore and called out for help, but the waves were too loud for them to hear. Nancy could only watch them go, and the shark kept hovering around the whale carcass, and Nancy knew it wouldn't last long. Then she saw a floating buoy, which was a bit far, but luckily there was a reef not far away where she could take as a temporary settlement. Immediately afterwards, the shark began to ram into the whale, trying to flip Nancy into the water, and Nancy managed to swim from the shark's blind spot to a reef not far away. She looked around and realized that she was really alone, with only one seagull being beside her. Nancy calmed down a bit and then simply stitched up the wound with a necklace and an earring to alleviate the pain. Then she tore off one of the sleeves of her wetsuit and put it on her leg. And so on. Nancy spent the rest of the night on the reef. The next day at first light, Nancy saw her surfboard floating just a short distance away, and upon observation, the shark was not nearby. She went into the water to get her board back, but just as she was about to reach it, the shark appeared. She swam back to the reef as fast as she could. Shortly afterwards, Nancy overlooked a drunk man lying on the beach near the shore, so she waved her arms, screaming for help. After seeing the drunk man get up, she instructed him to use the cell phone in her backpack to call for help. The drunk man was way too understandable for the situation. He took advantage of the situation and stole Nancy's backpack and got more greedy after finding a surfboard not far from the shore and went into the water to get it. Nancy warned him about the shark, but the drunken man didn't listen. Nancy had a horrified look on her face as the drunk was also cut in two by the shark. Don't know how long it had been, feeling hungry and thirsty, Nancy saw in a daze that the two surfers from yesterday had come back to the beach, and she hastily shouted that there were sharks. She also shouted them to get to shore and get help. At first, they didn't think any of it, but when they realized something was wrong with Nancy, one of them started swimming back to the shore. The other man, terrified, scrambled towards the reef of Nancy's whereabout. However, one wave later, the man was gone with only the broken surfboard surfacing. Luckily, he succeeded to swim to the reef. Nancy tried to pull the man up onto the reef, but he died afterwards. Nancy found one of them was carrying a GoPro. When the shark wandered off in a circle, she took the opportunity to go into the water to get it, but the shark soon came this way. The coral underneath the reef shielded the shark, and Nancy managed to survive and save her life. In the recorder, the camera shows the man being attacked by the shark. She also noticed a large iron hook in the corner of the shark's mouth. It looks like it had been hurt by fishers. Moreover, Nancy had inadvertently entered the shark's prey area, and that's what hid the shark on her. Then Nancy found a stuck sharp tooth in the camera hat. She kept the tooth so that she might use it. Moments later, it was almost time for the surging tide. The tide would definitely submerge the reef she was on, so Nancy decided to make a hard swim to the far buoy. Before her settle, she recorded a video and prepared for the worst. leaving her last message for her father and sister. And then Nancy threw the hat with the camera down the shore in the hope that someone would pick it up. She released the seagull with her surfboard. And as the tide began to rise, she saw a lot of jellyfish floating around the reef. Nancy jumped into the sea and used her flexibility to swim through the horde of jellyfish to avoid the shark's fierce onslaughts. The bottom of the buoy had a lot of exposed sharp steels. She had to swim hard to get to the buoy. Soon after, a boat passed by in distance. Nancy took out her sharp teeth and cracked open the emergency box on the buoy. A flare gun was found, but all the flares had fallen into the sea. She managed to grope one shell, loaded the gun and fired. Unfortunately, the bullets failed to launch far because it was soaked badly. By the time she picked up the other 3 shells and fired again, the ship was already far away and Nancy was once again in despair. Meanwhile, a young boy came to the beach. He found Nancy's recorder, and he turned it on, witnessing Nancy's video for help. Soon, the sharks launched a new attack on the buoy. Nancy used the flare gun fend off the shark by igniting the whale oil floating on the sea surface. The shark, completely enraged by the fire, frantically hit harder onto the buoy, which made one of the chain attaching the buoy broke. The buoy tilted. Nancy recalled that there were sharp steel scraps locating at the bottom of the buoy. She immediately made her next move. As the shark was attacking Nancy, the hook stuck in its mouth got tangled, thus limiting its movement and giving Nancy time to escape. She pulled off another chain from the buoy and then used the chain's sinking momentum to accelerate herself towards the bottom of the buoy. Before hitting the bottom, Nancy suddenly turned sideways to lure the shark into the scrap. The shark was completely pierced through by the sharp metal. After the hard fight, Nancy fainted, but survived with the help of the boy who called his father. 1 year later, Nancy had become a real doctor after learning the meaning of life through her harsh survival. She still kept her passion for surfing though. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel.